Your Honor, I would like to call to the stand my surprise witness, the ghost that never lies. Ooh. But I'm the only one who can see him and hear him, so I'll let everyone know what he's saying and doing.
Objection, Your Honor. This is ridiculous.
Overruled. I'll allow it. You better be going somewhere with this, Mr. Griffin.
Thank you, Your Honor. Ghost that never lies, did you witness the events that took place on that fateful day? You did? Well, how interesting. And do you see the culprit or culprits in this courtroom today? You do? Yeah. Well, would you kindly point him or them out for this court? Don't point at me!
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, everyone. And hello to you, Mr. Drew, or should I call you genetically modified skeptic? My name is Asadullah Ali Al-Andalusi. I'm the founder of the Andalusian project. And this video is going to be addressing your video, 4 Lies Muslims Tell About Ex-Muslims. Now, prior to getting into this response, I'd like to offer some disclaimers. The first of them being the reason I'm making this video. Well, firstly, I'd like to say just right off the bat that I commend you for supporting individuals who are being persecuted, for speaking out for them, supporting their cause. I commend you for even trying to normalize dissent in the Muslim world. I happen to believe that ex-Muslims should not be punished for their disagreement with Islam. I'm among many Muslims who believes this, and I have my own theological reasons for this as well. That said, that's not the point of this video, so I'm not going to go in depth as to why that's the case. But I just want to let you know that my intention here is not to undermine your agenda. It's not to undermine what you're trying to do in assisting other people, or trying to bring attention to the plight of many ex-Muslims in the world. That said, the point that I'm trying to make, the reason that I'm making this video, is to address many of the erroneous claims and assumptions that you've made throughout your video in support of that agenda, and even some of the anti-Muslim tropes that you've utilized in order to do so, throwing a lot of Muslims under the bus in order to do so. And I find this not only to be problematic, but rather dangerous, which is the reason why I'm addressing this video. Disclaimer number 2. You might find that this video is rather intimidating in its length, but I assure you that there's no fluff here. A lot of it is necessary. Actually, most of it is necessary. And I just wish to appeal to Brandolini's law here, in that the amount of energy needed to refute nonsense is an order of magnitude greater than to create it. So take that to mind as you watch this video, and please do not consider the length to be a negative of this response. Disclaimer number 3, as per my academic standards, you'll also find a bibliography in the information box, so that later on or during the video you can go to those references and examine them for yourself to basically prove to yourself that I am presenting those references with integrity. I assure you that I am, which is why I'm going to be as transparent as possible. Hence the bibliography. And disclaimer number 4. If you're expecting this video to conform to particular anti-Muslim tropes or stereotypes that you have about Muslims, such as the following: if you criticize Islam, I will kill you. Darka darka. If this is your expectation or something similar to it, then I suggest that you change your expectations, because you will be sorely disappointed. So if you were thinking that this is going to be something that you can easily ridicule or use to your advantage, that's not going to happen. Rather, you should be taking my response very seriously, reflect on it, and see a lot of value in it, in the sense that it will help to better inform you in the future as you support ex-Muslims and Muslims against anti-Muslim bigotry. With all that said, let's discuss your first point, the first lie brought up against ex-Muslims, by Muslims apparently, and let's see what issues there are with your claim here.
Ex-Muslims find themselves in a unique situation even among other apostates. They do share many experiences with ex-Christians like myself, but they also face challenges unique to coming out of Islam specifically. There are certain myths and lies propagated about ex-Muslims which they face constantly, and those deserve to be refuted. Here we'll take on 4 of those lies, and with each, I'll bring in a different ex-Muslim activist to share their perspective on it. They just haven't studied X scholar or passage. If you're any type of apostate, you may have heard some variation of this. As an ex-Christian, I hear this all the time. However, even being an activist, I can't say that this is thrown at me as often as it's thrown at many of my ex-Muslim friends.
Anyone that understands Islam fully,
they will find it.
Never will you leave Islam. Never. Wallahi billahi. No way.
I tend to think that a reason why Muslims say this is that it allows them to maintain the belief that the more one studies Islam, the truer it appears, and no one could possibly be properly educated about Islam and then disbelieve it. After all, if one can study Islam thoroughly and then disbelieve it, well, that might mean that Islam isn't true. It comes off to me as a defensive move motivated by fear.
Interesting. So according to you, when a Muslim engages an ex-Muslim in discussion and debate and claims that that person is ignorant of the religion and then tries to correct them, this is a form of lying. Interesting. It's also, I guess you also think, a defense mechanism. Defense mechanism motivated out of fear. Well, to me, that analysis lacks introspection. Let me give you some context as to why Muslims respond that way. And it has nothing to do with fear or being some sort of defense mechanism. Maybe for some Muslims it does, but for the majority, I highly doubt that, especially for myself. Let me give you some context here. Atheists online and their ex-Muslim counterparts, who have adopted many of the much of the rhetoric and methods of atheists over the years, especially online, tend to behave a certain way when they're speaking with theists, and Muslims in particular. They tend to come off as suggesting, or not even suggesting, but outright claiming that Muslims are ignorant, stupid, brainwashed, irrational, etc., etc. And they even claim that they know more about Islam than every other Muslim and even traditional scholars and secular academics in Islamic studies. And they are also very dismissive of academic studies which do not agree with their opinions. They tend to believe, not all atheists and ex-Muslims, but many, tend to believe that they don't need to refer to academic material. So, yeah. In other words, it seems to me that Muslims are simply responding to that tendency, that sort of behavior exhibited by many online atheists and ex-Muslims. Like I said, not all, and maybe not even some of those in your own video, but many do, and you can find examples of this everywhere. For example, even in your own comments section, most of your top comments, discuss the ignorance of Muslims and theists in general. Likewise, if you go to the ex-Muslim subreddit, you'll find numerous topics basically demeaning Muslims as a bunch of idiots and dehumanizing us as irrational and generally ignorant and stupid. And you will also find more extreme opinions online. So, for example, I don't know if you're aware of Matt Dillahunty. He's well respected in the online atheist community. 6 months ago, he had to release a video refuting and condemning a popular position among online atheists that theism, not just a particular type of theism, but theism in general, belief in God in general, is a mental illness. Right? So, let me put it this way. If atheists, and ex-Muslim atheists in particular, are going to go around arrogantly stating that they know more than most Muslims, all Muslims, and Muslim scholars and Islamic studies academics, they're going to go around saying that everyone else is irrational and stupid and brainwashed and ignorant. they're going to generally act like a bunch of narcissistic ultra-crepidarians, posturing as autodictat polymaths who are credible simply by virtue of the fact that they lack belief in something, then you cannot be surprised that Muslims would respond by suggesting those people are ignorant and then trying to correct them through evidence. Just saying, I mean, and you should be rather grateful because that's quite mild in comparison. Once again, I want to clarify that this may not always be the case, but generally speaking, I think Muslims respond that way because that's how they are treated. I mean, that's how I've been treated many times. I mean, just up until recently, I was doing my PhD in Islamic Studies, and I postponed my degree so I can complete my second master's in Library and Information Science. But even when I was doing my PhD in Islamic Studies, so many people, so many ex-Muslims in particular, would approach me, not only just in person, but online, and suggest that basically I don't know anything and that I'm an idiot. And if you're going to step up and flex like that to me about a subject that I am obviously more learned about than yourself, and you're going to suggest that I don't know anything because some random idiot online gave you an opinion about about this subject, straight out of the rear end, then you should expect to be corrected to the extent that you are humiliated, because that's called reality. Now that said, what else is, what's interesting about your response here is that it seems to undermine intellectual discourse. It seems to it comes off as not only making ex-Muslims immune to criticism, but your assertion that Muslims who attempt to correct ex-Muslims by suggesting not only that they're ignorant, but showing evidence in support of that, claiming that those Muslims are liars, it comes off as rather, I don't know, juvenile. Because everyone has a right to suggest other people are ignorant about a subject matter, and then to try to correct them. This is how intellectual discourse occurs. This is how debate and discussion occur. And you've essentially destroyed any possibility of that by suggesting the other side are just liars. So, I don't know if that was your intention, but good job. It does happen to also remind me of something else. It reminds me of the tactic of a certain individual, a politician. I don't know if you know who I'm talking about, but let me try to give you an example of how he behaves. So they say about me in the media that I don't know what I'm talking about, but the mainstream media is fake news. They're all liars. They don't know what they're talking about. I know what I'm talking about. The experts, the climate change people, those experts, they don't know what they're talking about. I know what I'm talking about. Okay, you can trust me. Those people are liars. Fake news, fake news, fake news. I mean, if the shoe fits, come on. You thought it was funny. But that's actually not my biggest issue with your first point. My biggest issue is your assertion that Muslims are liars when they make this claim. Because not only is it a fallacy, otherwise known as the poisoning the well fallacy, or the fallacy of poisoning the well, something that you should be aware of considering that you're a self-proclaimed rational person, critical thinker, etc. In case you forgot, I'll remind you of how you should be rational here. But it also appeals to a typical anti-Muslim trope utilized by bigots to not only undermine Muslims' opinions about their own faith and about their own actions and beliefs, but to silence Muslims, to remove us entirely from the conversation so that the only people who can say anything factual about Islam are non-Muslims. It's to otherize us, basically, to make us make our opinions invalid. And I don't know if you're familiar with this, but it's called the taqiyya card. And a lot of Islamophobes, i.e. Anti-Muslim bigots, tend to use it. So, for example...
So deception is part of Islam. Allah is a deceiver, Muhammad was a deceiver, and therefore every Muslim can be a deceiver. It is so special that it has a name, taqiyya. So the next time you're hearing something about Islam that just doesn't sound right, and it comes from the mouth of a Muslim, you're right. It's not right. It's a lie. It is taqiyya.
So anyone who tells you that Islam doesn't promote this kind of deception either has no clue what he's talking about, or he's practicing taqiyya.
There is, of course, as you well know, in Islam, a doctrine of deception, a doctrine of deceiving unbelievers and making them think that Islam teaches or that Muslims in any particular situation believe something other than what they actually believe. And that there's a concerted effort in the United States to deceive the American people about the teachings of Islam in terms of the supremacist and violent aspects of Islamic teaching.
Some people say that Islam and Islamists give themselves permission to lie to non-believers. Sounds like the sort of vulgar, paranoid thing that an Islamophobe would go around saying, doesn't it? It's very easy to disprove, except that it hasn't been.
I bet you didn't expect the last one, did you? Sorry, I had to. I couldn't help myself. That said, if you think this is not a big issue, even one of the ex-Muslims in your video, Walid from Vidu Vids, spoke about this and has spoken about this quite a bit. So, for example,
in my 20-odd years, I never heard the word taqiyya being mentioned once. In fact, the first time I even heard the word taqiyya was actually by, I think it was an ex-Muslim or someone, or a critique of Islam, saying that Muslims are purposely lying to you. They're trying to be nice and trying to be moderate, but deep down they want to take over the world and take over. And I'm like, never taught this or even heard of this word. I'm not saying taqiyya doesn't exist, but it doesn't exist to the extent that certain critics of Islam make it out to be. In my humble opinion, I don't even think that the vast majority of Muslims even know what the word is, and certainly do not practice this as their default behavior, to lie to non-Muslims purposely so you try and get one over them in the future. That seems to be a horrible assumption to make of a huge number of people.
What's interesting here is that although he disagrees with this and thinks that this is a method used by bigots to silence Muslims and to demonize us, he participates in a video that essentially does the same thing. The irony was not lost on me, Walid. That said, you may argue, well, it's not the same. I'm not saying that Muslims are committing taqiyya and they're trying to deceive. Well, but it has the same effect. You're basically silencing Muslims. You're not allowing us to disagree with ex-Muslims and claim that they're ignorant. You're not allowing us. You're basically saying that any time that we disagree with ex-Muslims and their knowledge, that we are liars. It has the very same effect as the taqiyya card. It, like I said, different form, but the same product, right? And you're just playing into the hands of Islamophobes. And here you are trying to claim that you're against anti-Muslim bigotry. Now, I want to be frank that I don't think that you intended this. Maybe you weren't thinking when you said that this was a lie, that we're lying about ex-Muslims, but you should really take into consideration what you're promoting here. That said, before going on to your next point, lie number 2, as it were, you allow Imtiaz Shams to make a point. And prior to getting to the next part, I'd like to point out the, fallacious logic he employs in order to make his point. So here we go.
Something that I really hate is this idea that you have to have like a PhD and a certificate from Azhar University at Egypt to be an ex-Muslim. It's so common, and it's ridiculous, because often what I'll say back to them is, okay, cool, let's talk about Mormonism. What do you know about Mormonism? And mostly Muslims have no clue about Mormonism, Joseph Smith, the Book of Mormon, but yet they don't believe in Mormonism. So I always say, well, why are you not a Mormon? And if they have any arguments, I say, well, no, you don't have a PhD in Mormonism. So it's like people don't understand, it doesn't click in their head that leaving Islam doesn't require an in-depth knowledge base of Islam. So I would say, if that's the stereotype you have, I'd recommend either you understand that it's wrong, Or you do a PhD in every single religion in the world so that you can actually say that you're not a Christian or a Hindu or a Buddhist.
So there's a problem with this analogy. First off, the reason that Muslims tend to engage with ex-Muslims by suggesting that they need to be credible, that they need to have a certain amount of education. Not all Muslims say, of course, you need a PhD. Some do. But it all depends on what you're saying and how you're engaging and what you're engaging with. See, the whole Mormonism example was actually nonsensical because the thing is, when you approach somebody on the street, like random, like a Muslim, and say, well, why do you disagree with Mormonism? Well, I don't go out of my way to disagree with Mormonism. I don't go around criticizing Mormons or Mormonism, and I don't study Mormonism. The same way that atheists don't study all religions in order to become atheist. I'm a Muslim. I reject other religions on the basis of my own paradigm, which is the point I know that Imtiaz is trying to make. But the reason that Muslims make this accusation or declare that others need to have a certain level of understanding is because ex-Muslims generally are criticizing Islam and declaring themselves to have more knowledge than the majority of Muslims and even scholars. So if you're going to go around claiming that ex-scholar or ex-PhD is irrational, stupid, or ignorant of his own religion and that you're superior, then you should expect people to challenge you, to challenge your credibility, right? I mean, you shouldn't expect people to just randomly come up and challenge your lack of knowledge on a particular subject that you don't even talk about, that you don't even go out and criticize, that you don't even engage with. Like, it would be weird to expect me to have a PhD in Mormonism when I don't talk about Mormonism. I don't declare myself, I don't act like an authority on Mormonism, and I don't go out of my way to bash Mormons and Mormonism all day. But if you're going to go out and bash Mormonism and Mormons all day, then I think Mormons have a right to, ask for your credentials. I mean, that's pretty reasonable. So here Imtiaz doesn't seem to even understand what he's saying. Not surprising, but, that said, Imtiaz, I know you expect this video to bring more understanding to Muslims, but, given the fact that you can't even make a proper argument, much less a good analogy, and given the fact that you're participating in a video that declares all Muslims who disagree with you as liars, I don't think it's going to turn out the way you want it to. But hey, that's just me. So let's move on to point number 2, or should I say lie number 2, that Muslims apparently say about ex-Muslims.
They just want attention or they would leave quietly. Apparently, true ex-Muslims would never care about speaking against Islam. They would just leave it and never talk about it again. After all, when your entire life is forced to radically change by a shift in your worldview, you've been taught to be paralyzed by the fear of hellfire for disbelieving, and most of your friends and family see people like you as mortal enemies, your first instinct is obviously to get over it and just move on immediately. No, getting positive attention to stroke one's own ego is not the point of speaking out publicly for really any ex-Muslim. People are shunned, made homeless, imprisoned, or even killed for being apostates. There are 13 countries in the world, all Islamic, which punish apostasy by death. It's incredibly easy to see with the slightest bit of empathy that ex-Muslims might have reasons for speaking out which have nothing to do with them being praised. Many in that community want nothing but to be themselves and live. Consider that maybe ex-Muslims speak out against Islam because they feel it oppresses women. Maybe they speak out against it because it motivates their own families to disown them. Maybe it's because it prompts governments to execute those who believe differently. Maybe ex-Muslims stick together and praise each other because no one else will do that for them. Supporting Islamic doctrine and then claiming ex-Muslims just want attention is like cheering for a family to be ripped apart and then mocking the most isolated member of that family just for trying to pick themselves up again.
Okay. So in this clip, you claim basically that there are no ex-Muslims who come out as ex-Muslims and critique Islam because they want positive attention. It's all negative attention and whatnot. And this is intimately tied to your next 2 points about ex-Muslims wanting money and fame and wanting to appeal to Western audiences or Western people in general. And I sort of want to address all three of these points at the same time. But before doing that, I'd like to point something else out in this clip that was erroneous. And you might find it to be pedantic, but I think it's important and very instructive. So, in this clip, you mentioned Malaysia hunting down atheists, okay, or this reference from the Malay Mail Online, which is a news report about a Malaysian minister saying that we should hunt down atheists and ex-Muslims, and then you followed it up with this graphic, declaring that there are 13 Muslim-majority countries which punish apostasy with death. But both of these are wrong. And I'm not saying like just your perspective wrong. No, they're false. So let's look at the second claim first, that there are 13 Muslim majority countries that punish apostasy with death. The individuals who came up with this report, their organization is called the International Humanist and Ethical Union, and they come out with this freedom of thought report every year. And in the report, they mention these 13 Muslim majority countries which apparently punish apostasy with death. And one of those countries is Malaysia. Now, I don't want to go into every single, country that they accuse of this, but let's just look at Malaysia. Okay. And the reason I want to look at Malaysia is number one, I lived in Malaysia for 7 years, worked and studied there. And I was a civilian contractor there even for a number of months, working as a counterterrorism field expert. Actually actively engaging terrorist cells on the ground on the northern border with Thailand. So for those of you, asking me, well, why don't you make videos against terrorists? Well, first off, I have. And number two, I've already paid my dues, so spare me. So not only did I live in Malaysia for 7 years, I also studied the laws, the culture there. And I can tell you from my own personal experience that ex-Muslims are not killed there. Atheists as well are not killed there for being ex-Muslims and being atheists. Not even for blasphemy. Nobody is killed there for these things. And even the report itself, the one that claims, the Freedom of Thought report that claims that Malaysia is one of those countries that kills apostates, for simply being apostates, says itself that Malaysia does not kill apostates, that it's not even legal in Malaysia to kill apostates. And I'll just prove it to you right now. Let's look at the recent report, 2018 report, and the following paragraph. Under the title, Freedom of Expression, Advocacy of Humanist Values. Subtitle, Death for Apostasy. Despite contradicting federal law, the state governments of Kelantan and Terengganu passed Hudud enactments in 1993 and 2002 respectively, making apostasy an offense punishable by death. Despite their long-standing nature, however, no one has been convicted under these Sharia laws, and according to a 1993 statement by the Attorney General, the rulings could not be enforced without a constitutional amendment. Amending the penal code is the exclusive prerogative of the federal government. All right then. So that statement basically states that two states in Malaysia, Kelantan and Terengganu, passed enactments, wanting to punish apostasy with death, but the federal constitution knocked it down. So the federal government knocked it down. And no one can be punished by, with death for apostasy in Malaysia. And no one has been punished with death for apostasy in Malaysia because it's not legal to punish anyone for apostasy with death in Malaysia. In other words, Malaysia does not punish apostates with death. Right? That report itself states this very clearly. For those of you out there who want to argue, though, and say, well, in principle, Malaysia could punish apostates with death if they amended the constitution. Well, yeah, in principle, a lot of countries could do a lot of things if they amended their constitutions, but that doesn't mean we go around claiming that those countries are doing those things. For example, in the United States, there are a number of states which still have blasphemy laws on their books. You heard me, there are a number of states in the United States of America, my country, which have blasphemy laws. However, they're defunct because the federal constitution, the Constitution of the United States of America, the federal government in general will knock down any cases, anybody attempting to prosecute blasphemy. Now, according to your logic, because those laws are still on the books, even though they're defunct and they can't be enforced, therefore, if you go to the United States, you'll be punished for apostasy, or blasphemy, excuse me. You'll be punished for blasphemy. But that's nonsense. No sane person would say that. But if it's a Muslim majority country with the exact same situation, basically, having laws in the states that are non-operative, you're going to argue that, oh, no, they actually do those things. They're killing apostates left and right. They're hunting them down. Right? Sorry. No rational person will buy that. So think about that for a moment. That said, going back to the report that you showed regarding Malaysia hunting down, or this minister saying that we should hunt down atheists, other reports showcased that what he meant by that was that to hunt them down was to basically take them in for counseling sessions. And that's actually what happens in Malaysia for the most part, is that apostates, they're sort of forced to go to these counseling sessions where they talk to an imam, a religious scholar who tries to convince them over the months. And in some states like Negeri Sembilan, they actually grant people the right to apostate. So, you have to fill out an application, whatever, blah, 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 and then they look it over, they review it, and then they determine whether or not, you can leave. Some states fine you, and some will even send you to jail, although I don't know of any cases where they sent people to jail recently, in the past, 10 years or something, but I'm not defending Malaysia in that respect. I just want to be clear about that. I'm not saying that's okay. Okay, you can critique Malaysia all you want for those things. But if you're going to critique Malaysia for something, critique Malaysia for what it actually does and not what you want it to do. Don't assert that Malaysia is actively going around slaughtering apostates and ex-Muslims, and atheists in general, and that it's legal to do so when that's not happening at all. Okay. As we're taught in graduate school, if you have to sensationalize data to make a point, if you have to misinterpret data to make a point, if you have to misrepresent data to make a point, then you don't actually have a point. Try to use some academic integrity. Try to have some academic integrity. Just being an honest person, okay? Then, you should follow these standards. I'm not saying that you did this deliberately, but you should try to review your sources before using them. Just because ex-Muslims are going around saying that 13 countries are punishing apostates doesn't make it so. Look at your source material. It's probably closer to 8 countries, which is still 8 too many, but it's not 13. There are a number of other discrepancies in that report. And by the way, even though the United States of America has blasphemy laws in certain states, that same report doesn't mention that at all. And it doesn't accuse the United States of America for having blasphemy laws and punishing people for blasphemy. I wonder why. Right? It's not bias or anything, right? I just wanted to make that point real quick because, I keep seeing this claim that there are 13 countries, and it's just not true. It's not true at all. Okay, and just because we live in a climate where anti-Muslim sentiment is the norm, especially in the West at least, doesn't mean it's okay to misrepresent data. It doesn't make it moral to do so. Right? All right, so let's go back to the main topic at hand here. So I apologize for digressing, but I did feel that to be very important to mention. All right?
They left so they could get fame and money. This accusation is just slightly different from the last, but my friends and I had to include it because it's so common and so absurd. To think that there's more money involved in being an ex-Muslim than in being an evangelist for Islam ignores clear evidence to the contrary. The ludicrously popular Zakir Naik sells out arenas for his preaching. He has his own TV network called Peace TV. Even on a totally different level of exposure, the pattern is still clear. Ali Dawah and Mohammed Hijab, both apologists and YouTubers, have run several extremely successful giving campaigns in recent years. One example is that in a singular campaign in 2018, they raised over 25,000 British pounds for their own ministry. In the same year, my activist friends and I, including many ex-Muslims, raised money for ex-Muslims of North America, and we raised $5,000. My point in all of this is not to accuse any of the people I've mentioned of unethically profiteering off of Islam or their ministries, or to paint ex-Muslims as morally superior. All I mean to demonstrate is that much of the time, money and recognition is not easily found in speaking against Islam, and that it might actually be more easily found in speaking for it. To give her perspective on this, here's Marwa, aka Mimsy Vids.
I get told all the time that I am openly an ex-Muslim because of fame and money, and that's basically why I want to do it. But it's actually the complete opposite. Firstly, there's actually no money in this. I don't know why they have this impression that I'm like working for the Jews or the Zionists or something like that. There's absolutely no money in being an ex-Muslim. No one wants to stand by you. In fact, we are opposed by everyone.
They leave to gain acceptance from white or Western people. This takes a complex issue having nothing to do with race and oversimplifies it into an issue that's only about race. Having come out of my family's fundamentalist Christianity, I've seen how difficult it is for some people to accept that their loved ones have made a calm, rational decision on leaving religion rather than a frantic, emotional one. However hard it is, though, there's no excuse for hearing someone's reasons for leaving religion, refusing to believe them, and then completely fabricating different reasons why you think they left. If someone tells you about the scientific, moral, or philosophical reasons they left Islam, and you then posit that they just left to please white people, or anyone else really, you're not listening.
Okay, so now we have all of the so-called lies that Muslims tell about ex-Muslims. According to you. And all three of these, the one prior about Muslims, are ex-Muslims wanting attention, and now this one about ex-Muslims wanting fame and money, and of course, wanting to please Western people, I feel that they all have something in common. Using your ex-Muslim status as clout, getting ahead in life through that clout, and essentially, just benefiting yourself through this sort of identity or rejection of an identity. And before really dissecting this further, first off, I want to say this, that I do believe that any Muslim who uses these accusations against every ex-Muslim they see, it is a smear tactic. Okay, I believe that it's a smear tactic. I believe that it's unjustified, it's unfair. And, it serves as basically poisoning the well. The exact same thing that you did earlier. So, yeah, it's wrong. However, your claim that, at least to your knowledge, no ex-Muslim does these things. Even Mimsy's comment that, there's no money to be made as an ex-Muslim and that nobody supports ex-Muslims and, it's all nonsense. There is actually a reason that Muslims say these things, and it's not simply to undermine every ex-Muslim's opinion. It's because Muslims in general have experienced the very things that they're accusing your friends of. I don't understand why you're not aware of this, but let me give you some perspective here, and then I'll offer some evidence, okay? First off, the reason that your friends don't generally get platforms or make a lot of money online is because the message they're selling, which is to normalize dissent, is first off relatively new, okay? Because prior, certain ex-Muslim figures were not trying to normalize dissent. What they were trying to do was normalize anti-Muslim bigotry. And unbeknownst to you and your ex-Muslim friends, there are ex-Muslim figures, were and are still, who are far more prominent, far more influential, and far more rich than they are. So it's not that people don't care about them or that people aren't supporting ex-Muslims is that they're not supporting your friends, because the message that your friends are selling is not the message that a lot of Westerners want to hear. But there are, in fact, many prominent ex-Muslims, higher figures, higher profiled individuals than your friends, who are out there currently making quite a bit of money and have a lot more influence. So it's not like there's this leftist conspiracy out there to deplatform your friends and to silence them, you know, and not care about them because, you know, they're trying to protect Islam from criticism. It's because there are other ex-Muslims taking those platforms, and there are other ex-Muslims taking that money. And those are the ones that Muslims have been used to seeing for the past couple of years, especially since the beginning of the war, on terror. So, if you don't believe this, well, many of those people are here in the United States. And not only do they make a lot of money, they have a lot of influence, but they also influence the political system. They fuel the war on terror. They justify the war on terror. And they do a great deal of damage not only to religious minorities in the West, i.e. Muslims, but they also do a great deal of damage to just every other American. And, you know, like I said, I'm shocked that you don't know this because there are quite a few figures. So, I'm going to give you a few examples. And they're going to be quite lengthy examples because, you know, I want to go into some detail. It's not going to be everyone that I know of, and it's only going to be isolated to the United States. But you have to remember that the United States is probably the most influential country in the world, and the war on terror started from here. Okay? So the US is the one that's really influencing what's going on in the Muslim world today, at least primarily. So these individuals are extremely powerful with what they say and do. And I hope that this is very instructive for you. So let's begin with one figure by the name of Walid Shoebat, who was exposed by CNN in 2008 as a fraud. And he is a famous ex-Muslim, became Christian, who goes around the country educating people about the dangers of Islam and being an expert on Islam, and also counterterrorism. So here's that expose.
Keeping them honest every night. AC 360. CNN, weeknights 10 Eastern.
Well, full disclosure, at one time or another, CNN and other networks have turned to Shoebat for his perspective on the war on terror, an apparent look from the inside. But keeping him honest tonight, we're discovering that Walid Shoebat's story just doesn't seem to add up. Here's CNN's Drew Griffin of CNN's Special Investigations Unit.
I think we are at war with Islamic fundamentalism and Islamism, which stems from Islam. You know, no historian can deny that Islamists basically invaded Christendom.
Walid Shoebat's message is the epitome of good versus evil. He has an advertised pedigree that makes him an expert. Islamic terrorist turned ultra-conservative Christian. A U.S. citizen because his mother is American. He is a darling on the terror circuit, the church and university circuits, and yes, he believes the war on terror is a holy war. He portrays himself as a man converted and on a mission. Once a Jew-hating, bomb-throwing terrorist, now a devout Christian convert warning the world, Islam is out to destroy you. It's clear Walid Shoebat does not like tough questions.
It's a stupid question.
He became even more defensive when we began asking about his foundations, his tax-exempt status, and all the money he is making. He has turned what some might call hate speech into a career, trading on his past to advise law enforcement officials and religious groups about the threat of Islamic radicals. He says he was a Palestinian terrorist, jailed by the Israelis, but it's a life story based on very little evidence. But it sure pays well. Tax records filed by his business partner reveal his speaking engagements earned more than $560,000 in 2009. The money is coming from universities and churches and from your tax dollars. Some of his appearances are paid out of Homeland Security grants. The DHS in South Dakota told us Shubat was paid $5,000 plus expenses to speak at this event, and he was given security. But Shubat told us,
No, there's no expenses they paid. The hotel I paid myself. The hotel I paid today myself.
the bigger question may be why Walid Shubat is in South Dakota teaching a bunch of cops about Islamic terrorists, a state that has so few Muslims. A local newspaper here in Rapid City says only a couple of dozen live here year-round. Jim Carpenter is South Dakota's Homeland Security Director.
What was the point of bringing him here? I think he brings a point of view that certainly is not necessarily mainstream. It's not a South Dakota-based point of view. He brings in commentary about living and being raised as a Muslim and then converting over to Christianity.
So why would someone's religious conversion be important to a Homeland Security conference in Rapid City, South Dakota?
You know, I really couldn't figure that out, and based on further questions, I really didn't get a good answer from Jim Carpenter with the South Dakota Department of Homeland Security.
$500,000 in 1 year. Wow. And I love the question at the end, how does somebody's religious conversion, becoming an ex-Muslim, make them an expert? Well, I don't know. That's a good question, and we're going to answer that near the end of these examples so that, you kind of understand better what's going on here. But let's look at somebody else now. Let's look at another famous ex-Muslim in the United States who's a darling with the neoconservatives and even many universities. Her name is Wafa Sultan. So let's see what she has to say about Islam infiltrating the United States.
How do you let him teach these teachings inside American schools here in America? I have a friend whose son attends a middle school in San Diego in California. His history teacher gave him a project, 5-point extra credit if you fast 1 day of Ramadan. So Islam is infiltrating and you're not doing anything about it. My friend is Egyptian, Coptic Egyptian. He went, he fought for 2 weeks and nothing was done.
But how would we stop it from infiltrating?
Get involved in politics. You have to know what kind of leaders you are. You are choosing to take care of your country.
But if we got involved in politics, what would we say? What would our platform be? What would we say?
Islam is not religion.
We need to do A, B, and C. What is A, B, and C?
The same way you dealt with Nazism. Right. The same way. The same exact way. The same Islam way. The same way. You reverse the Japanese culture. The same exact, you might need to do it. Yes. You might need to do a heavy pressure. I cannot predict what kind of pressure. You understand it. I don't have to say it.
Pressure. So we got to deal with people teaching kids about Ramadan by putting the same pressure we put on the Nazis and the Japanese during World War II onto American Muslims. And what type of pressure would that be? I mean, she can't be saying what you think she's saying, right? Well, actually she is. So here's a clip of her in that same lecture or that same talk where she clarifies what she means by pressure.
And I truly believe the King Abdullah can change Islam overnight, but you need to put pressure on him to do it. And the same kind of pressure you put on Japan, you might need it to be changed. Yes, eventually the West will need to do it. You have to put huge pressure on him to change Islam. This is the only way.
Okay, atom bombs. Yeah, why not? Let's drop some atom bombs on all these evil Muslims. Let's see, how about another ex-Muslim star? How about Noni Darwish, who's also a darling for the neoconservative right and and even a lot of universities. Here's her trying to explain her understanding of Islamic law and basically using it as a means to explain how Muslims behave both overseas and in the United States. And then watch how she tries to defend herself from accusations of bigotry by playing the whole, I'm just criticizing an idea.
You're obliged to lie if the purpose is obligatory. Slander is permissible. There's 2 or 3 pages of permissible slander in Islamic legal books and Islamic scriptures. Legal slander. Slander. Permissible slander. There is no coincidence in the Muslim world. There is no coincidence why slander is used on a daily basis on Arab TV. It's not a coincidence. It's legal. It's not just legal. You're obliged to do it if it's for the benefit of Islam. And this is what the infection we are getting by Sharia. A lot of people think that Sharia, with its blasphemy laws, its apostasy laws, it's just a religious right. It's our religious right to practice our religion in America. We need to practice our Sharia. It's our religious right. But what about the law that states that an apostate must be killed, and a girl or a woman who commits adultery, she can be killed by her husband? These are laws that are totally against our Bill of Rights in America. How are we going to reconcile this? Something has to give. Is it going to be us or them? Well, they believe this is their religious right to kill. And jihad is killing. The definition of jihad is to war with non-Muslims to establish the religion. That's not my opinion, that's their Sharia books. How could you say, don't you like Muslims? Why do you speak against us like that? Why do you say all Muslims are evil and they're all terrorists? Did I say all Muslims are terrorists now? I'm speaking about an ideology and a legal system. I'm not speaking about people. And I can say this 10 times, and at the end, there's always one person that comes up and tells me, but how could you criticize people like that? I'm not speaking again about people. I'm speaking about an ideology, like speaking against Nazism or communism or whatever ism. Muslims, there's good and bad in everything. There are some of the nicest people I know are Muslims, so please don't give me a question now telling me, are you insulting Muslim people? Okay, because this is the way they get away and dilute the discussion about an ideology and an oppressive legal system and make me try to look like the villain, okay?
Oh, no, of course not. Of course not. Noni, you're not a villain at all. I mean, you got Muslim friends, so you must not be no bigot, right? It's interesting. I love it when ex-Muslims and atheists always say that, oh no, the Islamophobe, when you say somebody's an Islamophobe, you're just trying to silence them, because we're just criticizing ideas. Well, maybe the reason that many Muslims may conflate your criticisms of ideas with, being bigoted is because you have people like Noni Darwish who use that as an excuse to be bigoted. And it's kind of hard to believe because people more prominent than yourselves, those of you out there who complain about the word Islamophobia being just a means to undermine criticism, maybe it's because other people use it, and instead of acknowledging that and trying to address it, you act like it's Muslims' fault, like we're just making this stuff up. We're liars, right? Just like we're liars that there are certain ex-Muslims out there like the ones that I just showed you, right? Let's move on to somebody else. How about Shahram Hadian, another ex-Muslim turned Christian, who was quite influential, especially in Idaho. He was able to convince a bunch of lawmakers to table a bill granting the state more funding for child support, because he was able to convince these lawmakers that by bringing in this bill, or certain wording in the bill, it would introduce Sharia law into the country, or allow Sharia law to take over in the country. I'm not joking. This actually happened. An ex-Muslim in this country, in the state of Idaho, was able to convince lawmakers to table bills that would have benefited the general population, children, because he made them fear that the Muslims were going to take over. Thankfully, that bill was eventually passed, but the state lost quite a bit of money as a result of that bill being tabled. And a lot of children suffered as a result, because this idiot was more concerned about his expertise being noticed. He was more concerned about being a narcissistic jerk, that he was able to compromise the lives of so many children in the state. So yeah, that's another example. And how about the darling Ayaan Hirsi Ali, one that you mentioned in your video, a hero of yours apparently, a hero for many people, a Somali immigrant who came over to the United States, fearing for her life from all these evil terrorists everywhere, constantly has to have security around her. She's worked with several right-wing think tanks, conservative think tanks. She writes constantly about the threat of political Islam taking over the West. You know, all these Muslim immigrants coming in and just taking over, you know, creeping Sharia. You know, according to you, she needs all that security because she's being constantly threatened. There's just Muslims just hiding behind all these trees, just waiting to jump out and lash at her. You know, just stab her with a fork or something. Foaming at the mouth Muslims just everywhere, waiting for that right moment to kill her. Yeah. Because, you know, that doesn't play a part into anti-Muslim bigotry, that notion that you're constantly in fear of your safety, right? In the West, even. I remember, sorry to digress here, but I remember being in Malaysia, a Muslim majority country, and actually being threatened in person by ISIS members and ISIS affiliates and ISIS supporters. And not once did I request security around me, aside from the fact that I can use a gun and I can defend myself. Yeah, my speaking engagements, I didn't charge for them. When I spoke out and I tried to also help the youth not join these groups, these terrorist organizations. And yeah, I never once asked for somebody to give me an entourage of security when I went out in public. But I guess my convictions were more important to me than the money and the what I consider to be the good marketing of being seen as being in danger, right? Because that's what Ayaan Hirsi Ali does. I mean, the whole security thing, security detail, it's not really because she feels she's unsafe in the United States of America. It's because it's good marketing, and people like you eat it up. Yep, and that marketing is basically based on anti-Muslim bigotry. So, you know, if the majority of Muslims are seen as crazy psychos who are just willing to kill you at any moment, you know, you can justify all the security you want. That said, yeah, Ayaan Hirsi Ali, so makes quite a bit of money. You admitted yourself that she makes quite a bit of money. And she does. She's quite rich. And yeah, she says a lot of ridiculous things. So, for example, I don't know if you recall, but at one conference, I believe it was in Germany, she basically victim blamed the victims of Ander Breivik's murderous rampage. So, before explaining it, you know, just let you watch it for yourself.
That one man who killed 77 people in Norway because he fears that Europe will be overrun by Islam may have cited the work of those who speak and write against political Islam in Europe and in America, myself among them, but he does not say in his 1,500-page manifesto that it was these people who inspired him to kill. He says very clearly that it was the advocates of silence. Because all outlets to express his views were censored, he says he had no other choice but to use violence. Decades of informal censorship in Europe have led not to the promised integration of Muslim immigrants, but to a culture of evasion and avoidance, which has allowed extremism, both jihadism and neo-Nazism, to flourish amid a general impotence of the established parties.
All right, so here she's basically saying that, well, to give you some context for those of you who don't know what happened, Anders Breivik went on a rampage where he slaughtered 77 people, most of them children, or minors at least. And those minors were attending a camp for the politically left, politically left camp. So they were basically children from families of the political left. And they were doing a training session, and he wanted to kill them because he believed that they were the future, and that if he didn't kill them, they would bring in more Muslims and immigrants to take over the West and destroy his civilization. So that was his basic justification. And he used a lot of anti-Muslim bigots to justify his views. For example, one of them was Ayaan Hirsi Ali. He quotes her in his work, his manifesto, work, whatever you want to call it. And he basically uses her ideas to motivate him. Ayaan Hirsi Ali, knowing this, responds she condemns him in her speech, but then she goes on to say, well, it's not my fault. It's the fault of the leftist who censored him. Leftist didn't censor Anders Breivik's crazy conspiracy theories about Muslims, then he wouldn't have killed their children. That's basically what she said, in a nutshell. Yeah. So, ironically, without realizing that she was actually justifying the accusation against her, that she was used as justification for his views, because it was her ideas about being censored by leftists that made him feel motivated to resort to violence. So she's basically just saying, yes, he was influenced by me. All she's trying to say, though, in that speech is that, well, I didn't tell him to go out and shoot people. So it's not my fault. Yeah, okay. She's a piece of dirt. And it's interesting, how many people consider her a hero despite comments like these and her views. But, when Ilhan Omar, a Somali immigrant congressman in the United States, is not reverent enough, doesn't use enough reverent language for 9/11 victims, when she says some people did something, all of a sudden, people want her deported or even killed. She got death threats for that. And yeah, because she didn't use enough sacred language, enough exaggerated language to condemn these evil terrorists and to honor the victims. She's seen as like an ISIS operative. But Ayaan Hirsi Ali victim blames people for being slaughtered by one of her followers, and she's just like, everyone's like, oh, she's a hero. It's quite disturbing. Likewise, though, even among your friends, there are some problems. See, maybe some of the reasons that Muslims see some of your friends as being like these people is because they also share some of their views. So, for example, Mimsy Vids says stuff like this sometimes, and it sounds just like something a bigoted white Westerner would say.
Someone looking at you and saying, oh, she's got a nice body, so what? The fact that the men in Muslim countries are way more animalistic and dangerous when it comes to women and kind of being alone. Women can't really go out alone in a Muslim country, not really. And that's because of the men. You don't really see that in the West. Women go out all the time in whatever they want. So it's kind of like the proof is in the pudding with this sort of thing.
Yeah, basically saying that all Muslim men in Muslim countries are more animalistic than their Western counterparts, i.e. less human when it comes to women. Yeah, that's just criticism of Islam. That's not bigoted at all. That's not a bigoted statement to make in the least. I mean, it's a really absurd thing to say, especially since the fact that, it's just not true. I mean, I've lived in the Muslim world, I've traveled the Muslim world. There are many places in the Muslim world where women are perfectly fine being by themselves, working by themselves, traveling by themselves. I can name a couple of countries: Indonesia, Malaysia, Turkey. Okay, even the UAE. You don't need to walk around with a mahram, or a male guardian, as it were, to go places. And women are perfectly safe, and they live and they thrive. And there's not these like savage, animalistic men just waiting to ravage them, from every corner. Okay, that's just a disgusting thing to say. It's absolutely wrong. And if she's retracted this in another video and apologized for it or something, then I retract my sentiment. But if she hasn't, this is something that she needs to be called out for. Especially by skeptics like you. Although I doubt that'll happen. And it's people like the ones that I showed, not necessarily Mimsy, but people like Noni Darwish, Wafa Sultan, Walid Shobat, and others who make a career out of their ex-Muslimness, their ex-Muslim status, demonizing the Muslim population, fueling the war on terror, fueling anti-Muslim bigotry. It's because of people like them, and of course Islamophobes in general, that I, as an American citizen born here, not an immigrant, okay, I'm a revert to Islam, and my wife constantly feel in danger. It's because of that rhetoric, because of the people they fuel to go around shooting up mosque and assaulting us and harassing us generally in life. I mean, there's a reason that I carry this around, okay? And don't worry, it's not loaded and there's no clip. I'm not going to shoot myself on set. But there's a reason I carry this around constantly, okay? Because I actually feel like I'm in danger living in this country. Whereas I'm pretty sure that the majority of ex-Muslims in this country don't even carry a weapon. And I'm even pretty sure that all the ex-Muslim friends you have, or at least the vast majority of them, don't carry a weapon around because they're not actually scared for their lives. I'm pretty sure. And I'm not just talking about guns, I'm talking about any sort of weapon. Okay? This is actually not my favorite model. My father's borrowing my Beretta right now. But anyways, what was I going to say? Oh yeah, but there's a reason that, these figures also have so much clout, that they're not scrutinized, that they're not criticized by the majority of people who listen to them, and that many Westerners don't ever question their credibility. I mean, even yourself, you don't even, you take everything that your ex-Muslims friends say at face value. You've never questioned it. In fact, you are so gullible, and I'm sorry I have to be frank, that you're willing to say that everything that Muslims say in response to your ex-Muslim friends are lies. That's how gullible you're being right now. And the reason why you're like this, and many Westerners are like this with regard to ex-Muslims, especially the ones that I just showed you, is because you, like many Westerners, suffer from certain cultural superiority complex. Not all of you, but many do. What I like to call Kipling syndrome, otherwise known as white man's burden. And this is the reason that you take ex-Muslims to be authorities on everything, Islam and Muslims. And you don't question them, you don't question the sources they use, you literally question nothing that they have to say. And, you basically treat them like they're native informers or native informants. And Hamid Dabashi, who wrote a book called Brown Skin, White Mask, he describes these ex-Muslims in the following way. And I quote, "Native informers like Hirsi Ali, Nafisi, and Irshad Manji are paraded before their North American and Western European audiences as voices of dissent against the innate and enduring barbarity of Islam. The pathology they nurture grows with every atrocity by or against Muslims, and it is bound to continue to be exacerbated as the U.S.-Israeli war against Muslims deepens, i.e. the war on terror. The Americans turn to expatriate intellectuals to tell populations targeted for liberation e.g. Afghans, Iraqis, Somalis, Palestinians, and Iranians, that they intend to invade, bomb, and occupy their homelands for those populations' own good. But the primary target of this propaganda is first and foremost the Americans themselves, who need to be assured that they are good, noble, and superior people ordained by their Creator to rescue the world from its evils. What we are witnessing as a result is a whole new mode of knowledge production about the Orient, basically the entire world beyond Western Europe and North America, a form of knowledge produced under duress. There is no longer any need for expert knowledge when you can hear the facts from the horse's mouth. So, this is the reason that these particular individuals have so much clout, and it is so easy for them to simply say that they're ex-Muslims and get away with being experts on a particular subject matter and to do all the damage that they're doing. And that's not to say that they aren't ex-Muslims. They are. But yes, the point of all this was to show that, yes, these particular claims that you cite as lies can be used to demonize and to, or at the very least, to undermine criticism by ex-Muslims. It can be used as a smear tactic, as a form of poisoning the well. It can be used as poisoning the well, a fallacy. However, these claims didn't start off that way. They were motivated by something else. They were motivated by real life experiences with ex-Muslims who behaved in this fashion and still do. Much more popular ex-Muslims than your friends and many others that you know. So if you actually take this into consideration, you will understand what's really going on here. That there are actually two sides to this story. Unfortunately, though, because you are so, motivated by Kipling syndrome, that you don't notice this. You don't notice that there are two sides to this story. Instead, you want to erase what Muslims have to say about these things and about many other ex-Muslims. It's kind of like if, instead of addressing terrorism in the Muslim world, instead of saying, here's what Muslims really think about terrorism, instead of even trying to distance myself from terrorists who claim to be Muslim, it would be like you coming up to me and saying, well, look at what ISIS is doing. And I say, what are you talking about, you liar? There's no such thing as ISIS. ISIS doesn't exist. No Muslim would ever engage in terrorism. ISIS, they're just a figment of your imagination. That's essentially what you've done here. In the same manner, you've basically just said, well, all these things Muslims say, no, they're just lying. These are all just false. These are all just made up in their minds because, we savages apparently can't have legitimate concerns, legitimate experiences, legitimate grievances with many people in the ex-Muslim movement, as it's called. And if you don't believe that you are suffering from this sort of mentality, have you seen yourself in that video where you went to Palestine? I'll just let it play.
To me, one of these conversations stood out strikingly amongst the others. I was so taken aback in the moment that I posted about it on my Facebook page right after it happened. Today, I was in the streets of Palestine in Ramallah, and a 15-year-old boy came up to me. He was Muslim, and he said, you have a YouTube channel? And I said, yeah. He said, oh, genetically modified skeptic? And I was just... I was completely over the moon about it. And he's seen my videos, and he says that he follows me and he really loves them, and that he wants to show people that that everyone needs to be open-minded to accepting and loving atheists and people of all different religions, and that people shouldn't be discriminating for those reasons. And it was a really emotional moment for me. He and his friend were my last interview of the day, so we spent extra time on it, reflecting on all that we had heard that day. You guys, you get on YouTube, you watch YouTube videos?
Yes, of course.
You're on Facebook?
Yes.
What about Twitter, Instagram? You're on those?
Yes.
Yeah, do you get on Reddit? Reddit at all?
No.
If you're wondering about something, do you first talk to a person about it, or do you Google it?
I search about it, of course.
Yeah, online, right?
Yes.
And you read.
Yes.
You read
articles. Yes.
Wikipedia.
Yes, of course.
Yeah.
It's a good source.
Yeah. Do people that are much older than you do that as much?
No.
No, there's a big problem is that there isn't that big of a belief in not science per se, but I think more that it would be. It's considering all sources to be equal in strength. I heard something on the radio, therefore it's true. And like or the sheikh on the TV,
and
he said something, so it's true. And I think because with the money that gets involved, I don't think there's a lot of dishonesty there.
Oh my God, this is crazy. So you're the youngest person I've talked to today, and you're talking to me about how people will listen to things that their first search or their first person they talk to, or the radio or media, and they just believe it. You're the youngest person that I've talked to, and you're saying, no, okay, yeah, you need to look it up, you need to read about it, but you can't believe everything that you first hear. You're talking about how to determine a good source?
Yes.
You study and understand how to find out what a good, reliable source is. This is blowing my mind right now. It's just...
I mean, look, I commend you for traveling and learning about things, but this is really cringy, honestly. I mean, you're acting like the stereotypical, like, white guy who is traveling in the Amazon and finds, like, a tribe of people, and he's, like, so shocked that they can use tools and they have language. It's like, oh, these savages, they're like us. I can't believe it. Oh my God. And they're not, like, light-colored. It's so weird, right? It's like, oh my God, Muslims, they can think. How is that possible? You know, Muslims in the Middle East, how, oh my God, it's so weird. I'm so shocked that they're thinking. They have brains, right? I mean, I don't blame you necessarily for your ignorance, but it's just, I'm sorry, it's just really cringy. I mean, look, hey, I'll do you a favor. On behalf of all the Muslims in the world, to prove to you that we have the capacity for rationality and thinking, that we're just as smart, if not smarter than you, supreme atheist intellect. I'll give you the ultimate proof. Okay? Only one that you would appreciate. You ready? There you go. See? Told you. Now, I know you're probably thinking, oh man, why are you being so harsh? And I'm not trying to be, honestly, like I said, I respect what you're trying to do and stuff, but I do feel like you've done a lot more harm than good here. And I guess I'm just trying to snap you out of it. Okay, I think that you are perfectly capable of thinking about these things more reasonably now that you know the other side of the story. I'm perfectly, I really believe that you will come around to this, knowing that these, about the facts that I just showed you and having corrected you on numerous amounts of things. Unless, of course, Kipling syndrome takes over and you're just like, that stupid Muslim is not going to correct me. I'm the superior atheist. Then, you're going to have that problem forever. But I'm trying to give you the benefit of the doubt. And the reason I'm being kind of blunt with you as a fellow American is because I think you can take it. I don't mean to be offensive just for the sake of it, to tease you just for the sake of it. I'm just trying to get through to you. So, please take everything I said into consideration. And if you can't take what I said, into consideration, if you honestly can't look at me in the eye and go, yeah, I'm going to take advice from this Muslim guy, then maybe consider something else. And for this part of the segment, I'm going to allow Genetically Modified Skeptic to give you advice on how to have a more nuanced view of this discourse and of people in general.
If you care about anything more than stroking your ego by mocking them or putting them down, then take this recommendation to heart. Set your preconceptions aside and just listen.
So there you have it. Thank you for watching. I appreciate you taking the time to watch this very lengthy video. And if you'd like, please, subscribe and donate to my Patreon and PayPal so that I can continue doing this more. I work full time and go to school, so I probably won't have much time anyway, but your assistance is always appreciated. And, if you don't want to donate, that's fine. Please make dua for me, pray for me, and or share my material. That'd be really greatly appreciated. Once again, thank you. JazakAllah Khayr. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.